Hey there, my name is Nate Bagley, and today we're going to be talking about some of the most important marriage research of all time. So, Dr. John Gottman is probably the most prolific and famous marriage researcher on the planet today. And he studied couples for several decades. And in his research, he found that there are four behaviors that, if they exist and run unchecked in your relationship, they will eat your relationship from the inside out. He calls them the four horsemen of the marriage apocalypse. And over the next couple of episodes, we're going to spend some time talking about each one of those four horsemen. And today, we are going to start off with the first horseman, which is criticism. Okay, criticism. This is a tricky horseman. And we start off with criticism because criticism is kind of a gateway into the other four horsemen of the apocalypse. And I want to start off today by talking about the difference between a criticism and a complaint, because some people think that, oh, if criticism is one of the four horsemen of the apocalypse, that means I can't ever say anything bad. I can't bring up a problem if there's a problem. I can't air my grievances. I just kind of have to swallow the hard pill and let the little things go and just never ever complain. And that's not true. So the difference between a criticism and a complaint is that a complaint focuses on a specific behavior or a specific circumstance, whereas a criticism tends to focus on somebody's character, who they are as a person. So there's a difference between a complaint, which sounds like, hey, you said you'd empty the dishwasher and that didn't get done, which is like a specific situation, or hey, I don't appreciate it when you talk to me in that tone. It doesn't make me feel very good. Another complaint, as opposed to a criticism, which is typically accompanied with the words "you always" or "you never." So a criticism could sound like, "You always make me do all the chores. You never show up and do what you say you will do. You're always so mean to me. You always call me names, and I hate that." Attacks on somebody's character are almost always going to trigger another of the horsemen of the apocalypse, which we'll talk about next week. So the big difference between a criticism and a complaint is a criticism focuses on as an attack on somebody's character, on who they are as a person, typically accompanied with "you always" or "you never," and a complaint focuses more specifically on a moment in time, a specific behavior. And whenever you're bringing up something negative, you want to make sure that you're sticking to the behaviors and not your partner's character. Excuse me. And like I said earlier, criticism is almost always the gateway for the other four horsemen of the apocalypse. The reason criticism is so tricky is because it often starts off as being really well intentioned. Typically, it's not always this way, but in most cases, when I talk to somebody and they're being critical, they feel a little bit entitled to their criticism because they say things like, "Well, I'm just trying to help us be better as a couple," or "I know if my partner just knew about this thing that they were doing that was making us suffer, or this weakness that they had, that our relationship could improve." And why wouldn't I want to point that out? Like they have good intentions. Their initial intent is to help the relationship improve and maybe help their partner improve, but almost always it comes across as an attack on their character. We mentioned this earlier, that criticism is like labeling something about your partner's character rather than a behavior you would like them to change. And this is why the words "we need to talk" are really scary for so many people. When your partner approaches you and goes, "Can we have a conversation? Can we talk?" They're bracing themselves for the laundry list of things that their partner wants them to change and do better, and kind of the attacks on their character. And it's funny because the critical person kind of expects that their partner is going to sit down and listen and pull out a notepad and start taking notes and be like, "Oh, okay, so I don't keep my promises. What else? Okay, you don't like the tone of voice I use. Okay, go on. I don't pull weight around the house, enough weight. I need to step my game up there. Okay, I haven't been asking you out on enough dates. Okay, is there anything else? This is all great feedback. I'm gonna go work on this week, and then next week I want to come back and I want you to tell me more of what's wrong with me so I can be better." Like, that's kind of what we expect when we put our criticism hat on, is that our partner will respond to us that way. But that's just not the reality of how any of us respond. when we feel attacked, when we feel like our character or who we are as a person is being judged, is being measured, that we're falling short in some way. And so even when criticism is well intentioned, it does a lot of damage. And the likelihood that your partner will respond in the way that you want them to, which is taking out the notepad and being like, yeah, that's really great. You're right. Tell me more about my defects and shortcomings. It just doesn't normally happen that way. So one of the one of the flaws in criticism, and one of the reasons that it's so dangerous, is because the critical partner almost always, what Dr. Gottman says, they almost always have what's called a fundamental attribution error, and they approach the conversation from this perspective of, I'm not perfect, I'm not that bad. You, on the other hand, need to do some work. You are the one who has all the problems here. Like if we went to therapy, if I drug you to therapy and we sat down, the therapist would spend most of their time talking about you because, I'm pretty great. I show up as a pretty good version of myself. I'm not perfect, but I'm pretty close. You're the one who's imperfect. And the fundamental attribution error kind of prevents people from seeing how they contribute to the problems that they're experiencing in the relationship and the problems in their life. And they have a tendency to kind of put the blame elsewhere. And we all do this. This is a very human experience. But I would invite you, if you tend to be the more critical partner, to take into consideration that you may be experiencing the fundamental attribution error, meaning you're fundamentally attributing the error to something that's not you. It's the circumstances of the world because that's the reason that you're suffering, or it's your partner's choices, your partner's behaviors and mindsets, and that you have nothing to do with it. You're pretty much perfect and flawless. So the solution to criticism, according to Dr. Gottman's research, is to complain without blaming. We talked about this at the very beginning of the show today, that complaining about a specific circumstance, a specific behavior, is going to get you far more results than blaming your partner for the pain, the suffering, the problems that are existing within your relationship and within your life. So that is a really important thing to consider, is that if you're experiencing a lot of criticism problems, are you complaining or are you criticizing? And most likely, if you're getting into lots of arguments, if these conversations, difficult conversations, are escalating, becoming highly emotional, there's probably a high level of criticism and a low level of complaining. Now, another thing that you need to keep in mind is that criticism isn't always directed towards your partner. It's oftentimes very possible. It's not oftentimes very possible. It's always very possible that you can be critical towards yourself. Typically, highly critical people who are critical of others are also critical of themselves. And sometimes they're not critical of others, but they're very critical of themselves. And when you're hypercritical of yourself, when you attack your own character, when you criticize yourself too harshly, it can have the same negative impacts on your relationship as if you were criticizing your partner. And so it's important to understand the power of your inner narrative, the criticisms, the things that you say to yourself, and that you let go unchecked in your own brain and in your own heart. Those things can truly run rampant and have a hugely negative impact on your relationship if you don't take responsibility for those as well. Now, I know some of you might be thinking, well, what if my partner's the critical one? Like, what if I'm not the one who's being critical? What if my partner's the one being critical, and I can't shift from blaming to complaining? What do I do if I'm the one who's kind of always under attack? And that's a common question. I get it quite often, and I'd like to walk you through a couple of steps of things that you can do if you are feeling criticized, to avoid escalating the conversation and having it go very poorly, or just not standing up for yourself and being kind of a doormat to the criticizer. The first thing that you can do is help them pinpoint their feelings. So one of the great things that Dr. Gottman's research shows of how you can bring up, if you're feeling like you need to address something with your partner, he always says, start with what you're feeling. What is the emotion that you're feeling? Are you upset? Are you confused? Are you feeling lonely? Are you feeling disrespected? Are you feeling, there's a huge wide range of emotions that you can be feeling. And when you name your emotion at the beginning of the conversation, it creates a high degree of empathy instead of defensiveness. And so if your partner is coming across as being critical, most likely they have a need that's not being met, and they are experiencing some sort of intense emotion. and that emotion is being directed at you, if you can kind of stop before responding, before reacting to their attack, you can look at them in the eye and say, wow, you seem really upset. Help me understand what's going on here. Or you seem really sad and withdrawn. Are you doing okay? Can you talk, like, let's talk about this. How can I help? If you can help them name their emotion, it can help pull both of you more towards empathy, and the conversation can go in a more positive direction, and it'll take a lot of the heat off of you and help refocus it on the problem that really exists that you're dealing with. The next thing that you can do is ask for a redo. Now, the way, like the language that you use to ask for a redo can vary. You know, the language that I use in my relationship might be a recipe for disaster for your relationship. Like if you said what I say, to my wife to de-escalate, it might escalate the conversation with your partner. So make this your own. But the concept here is to do a redo. And one of the things we do in our relationship is if somebody says something in a heated tone, or maybe it comes across as a little harsh, we say something like, "Hey, can you do that again? But can you say that again, but in a different tone? Or could we get a redo here on that?" And it's kind of giving your partner a second chance to address the issue that they're facing, that's causing them a lot of stress and overwhelm and big emotions. It allows them to take a step back and take a deep breath and actually approach the conversation from a better place, from a better mindset. And so sometimes, we don't get it right on the first try and we need a second chance. And it's a very gracious gesture to offer your partner the opportunity to try again instead of just reacting and escalating the conversation. Another thing, I just mentioned this a little bit earlier, but I want to hammer it home. Dr. Gottman says that underneath every complaint or every disagreement, there's a yearning for connection. And typically, if your partner's upset, if they're frustrated that they're not getting what they want out of the relationship, if they're directing negative energy and emotion towards you, most likely they have a need, a positive need that they really want to get met, and they're just not articulating it very well. It's kind of like looking underneath the water, under the tip of the iceberg, to see what's really going on. So a great example that I use often is, if you say you're going to be home, let's say I said I was going to be home by 5:30 from the office, and my wife was expecting me. Maybe she was making dinner, and 5:30 rolls around, I'm not home. 6 o'clock rolls around, I'm not home. 6:15, I finally roll in the door. 45 minutes late. I didn't call, I didn't text, didn't let her know what was going on. She's going to be upset. And most likely, what she's upset about is not what she's going to say she's upset about. What she's going to say she's upset about is, "Gosh, Nate, like you said you'd be home 45 minutes ago. I was worried about you." But underneath the positive need, underneath the criticism, especially if she starts coming at me and saying, "You're always late. I can't count on you." The positive need that she wants met is, "Man, I want to know that you're going to be there for me in a time of need. I want to know that of all the people on this planet that I can count on, that you will be there for me when you say you're going to be there for me." Now that's a whole different conversation than, "Why didn't you call before you came home?" Talking about the logistics of when to call and when to text and when to reassure each other, it's not going to get you very far. But talking about the unmet need, the positive need that's underneath all of this complaint and the logistics on the top of the iceberg, talking about, "Hey, how can I show you that I'm going to be there when you really need me? And how can I be a reliable partner and somebody that you can trust?" That's a whole different conversation. And so helping your partner identify that positive need or you identifying it for them, it requires a lot of work. It requires a sense of emotional maturity, but it is a really powerful thing that you can do to improve your relationship and step out of that criticism cycle. And then the last thing that you can do is, if your partner continues to come at you aggressively, maybe they're attacking you, calling you names, telling you all the things that you do wrong, and you've attempted to de-escalate, you've attempted to help them identify their emotions, you've attempted to look for the need underneath the complaint, you've attempted to do all these things, and it's still happening. This is a great time for you to de-escalate by giving them space and saying, "Hey, looks like you're really upset right now. I don't want to engage in this conversation because I know I'm not going to be my best self. And so I'm just going to give you like an hour to decompress. And when you're ready to talk about this and not be so heated, I'd love to have this conversation with you." The trick here is that if you call for that timeout, you need to be the person who comes back and reinitiates the conversation so that you can move forward. So that is my summary of criticism. Criticism is very dangerous. Once again, it's the gateway to the other Four Horsemen, which we'll be covering over the next 3 shows. And if you are nervous about criticism in any way, just make sure that you go through and use these steps. And if you want to learn more about the Four Horsemen of the Apocalypse, make sure that you subscribe. You can click a link right up here. And if you want to watch the next episode, which is going to be all about defensiveness, you can just click right over here.